Captain Naomi Hayes cursed as her diplomatic vessel's engines sputtered and died, the purple-tinged atmosphere of Craxus rushing up to meet her. The planet's infamous magnetic storms had proven more than a match for her ship's supposedly advanced shielding. So much for the diplomatic corps' guarantees of safe passage. Red warning lights flooded the cockpit as the ship entered a steep dive. Naomi's fingers flew across the controls, fighting for any semblance of stability. "Computer, emergency landing protocols," she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The computer's response was lost in a cascade of electrical failures. The ground approached with terrifying speed, the alien landscape a blur of crystalline formations and deep violet vegetation. Naomi spotted a relatively flat expanse between two towering crystal spires and banked hard, praying the backup thrusters would respond. They did, barely, but it wasn't enough for a proper landing. The impact came like a hammer blow. Metal screamed against crystal as the ship carved a deep furrow into the alien soil. Naomi's restraints dug into her shoulders, the inertial dampeners struggling to compensate. When the ship finally stopped moving, she hung limply in her seat, tasting blood from where she'd bitten her cheek. "Well," she muttered, running a quick self-diagnostic, "not exactly the arrival I planned." Nothing seemed broken, though she'd have an impressive collection of bruises. The same couldn't be said for her ship. The hull integrity warnings suggested it wouldn't be flying again without major repairs. Naomi unstrapped herself and grabbed her emergency kit. The atmosphere was technically breathable according to her sensors, but she wasn't taking chances. The sleek environmental suit she wore, designed to blend diplomatic elegance with practical protection, would have to suffice. She had barely taken 2 steps from her ship when movement caught her eye. A shimmer of motion among the crystal formations. Training kicked in and she dove for cover just as a bolt of energy sizzled through the space she'd occupied. "Identify yourself, intruder." The voice that rang out was distinctly feminine, but carried an otherworldly resonance. Naomi risked a peek around her cover and saw her attacker. A tall, athletic figure in iridescent armor that seemed to shift colors with each movement. The Craxian warrior held a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. "Captain Naomi Hayes, Earth Diplomatic Corps." Naomi called back. "My ship was damaged by the magnetic storms. I come in peace." She mentally kicked herself at the cliché, but sometimes the classics were classics for a reason. "A likely story," the warrior responded. "The Void Hunters are known for their deceptions." Another energy bolt emphasized her point, this one close enough that Naomi felt its heat through her suit. "I'm not a Void Hunter." Naomi reached slowly into her kit and pulled out her credentials, the holographic display springing to life. "Look, I have proof of my identity. I'm here on a diplomatic mission too." A deafening roar cut her off. Both women turned to see a massive shape emerging from behind the crystal formations, a creature that seemed to be made of living shadow, its form shifting and writhing in impossible ways. "Void Beast," the Craxian warrior shouted. "Get down." Naomi didn't argue. She dropped flat as energy bolts crisscrossed overhead, the warrior engaging the creature with impressive precision. But the shots seemed to pass straight through the beast's shadowy form. Making the split-second decision, Naomi activated her suit's emergency beacon. The high-frequency pulse was meant as a distress signal, but it had an unexpected effect. The creature recoiled, its form becoming more solid. "Keep doing that," the warrior commanded, adjusting her weapon settings. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." Naomi maximized the beacon's output, gritting her teeth against the painful feedback. The beast solidified further, becoming vulnerable to the warrior's attacks. Together, they drove it back until a well-placed shot finally dispersed its shadowy form. In the aftermath, Naomi found herself face to face with her former attacker. Up close, she could see that what she'd taken for armor was actually an extension of the warrior's body, iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and electric blue. "I am Terrandril, Sentinel of the Crystal Spires," the warrior introduced herself, lowering her weapon. "It seems I owe you an apology, and my thanks." Few outsiders would stand their ground against a void beast. "Well," Naomi managed to smile, "I couldn't exactly let it eat you after you tried so hard to shoot me." A sound emerged from Terran that took Naomi a moment to identify as laughter. "You humans are strange creatures. Come, your ship is lost, and night approaches. The void beasts hunt in packs, and I doubt your beacon trick will work twice." As they made their way toward the distant spires of the Craxian city, Naomi couldn't help but think that this wasn't exactly how she planned to make first contact. But sometimes, she reflected, the best diplomatic relationships started with someone trying to shoot you. She had no way of knowing just how prophetic that thought would prove to be. The healing chambers of the crystal spires hummed with an otherworldly resonance as Naomi lay on the diagnostic bed. Crystalline medical devices orbited her like curious insects, their soft blue light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Despite Terrandrill's assurance that the technology was safe, Naomi couldn't help but feel like a specimen under examination. "Your biological structure is fascinating," the Craxian healer, Master Vrilthos, observed. His scaled fingers danced through holographic displays of Naomi's cellular structure. "Your exposure to the void beast's energy should have caused significant corruption, yet your cells show remarkable resistance." Terran stood nearby. Her iridescent scales shifted to a thoughtful shade of blue-green. Could it be related to the technology that affected the beast? The energy pulse from her suit? "No," Vrilthos replied. "This is something more fundamental. Captain Hayes, your species' adaptive capabilities are extraordinary. The very instability that should make you vulnerable to void corruption instead allows your cells to evolve against it." Naomi sat up carefully, mindful of the diagnostic equipment. "Are you saying humans are naturally resistant to these void beings?" The implications for Earth's defense made her diplomatic instincts tingle with possibility. "Not resistant," Terran corrected, moving closer. "Adaptive. There's a difference. We Craxians are resistant because our crystalline biology is stable, unchanging. But you," her scales rippled with fascination, "you changed to meet the threat." A distant alarm shattered the moment. Terran's scales shifted to alert crimson as she accessed the city's security network through her neural link. Void hunter vessels detected at the system's edge. 3 ships heading for the outer colonies. "The evacuation protocols?" Vrilthos asked, already moving to secure his equipment. "Initiated, but the colony's defenses are still weak from the last raid." Terran's expression hardened. "I need to join the response force." "I'm coming with you," Naomi declared, sliding off the diagnostic bed. Both Craxians turned to stare at her. "That colony has civilians, right? I'm trained in evacuation procedures, and if what you say about human adaptability is true, I might be useful." "Absolutely not," Terran began, but Vrilthos interrupted. "Actually, Sentinel, her presence could be invaluable. The data suggests interesting possibilities." The healer manipulated his displays, bringing up a complex pattern of interlocking energy signatures, human adaptability combined with Craxian stability. "The potential synergy is remarkable." Before Terran could protest further, another alarm blared, this one more urgent. "Multiple void rifts detected near the colony," a computerized voice announced. "Evacuation estimated at 30% complete." Terran's scales rippled with frustrated resignation. "Fine, but you stay close to me. Follow my orders, and if I tell you to run, you run. Clear?" "Crystal," Naomi replied with a slight smile, then winced at her own pun. To her surprise, Terran's scales flickered with amusement. The journey to the colony was tense. The transport vessel cut through Craxus' turbulent atmosphere, its crystal-powered engines humming with barely contained energy. Naomi studied the tactical displays, noting the positions of the void rifts, tiers in reality through which the hunters launched their raids. "Why do they do it?" she asked quietly. "The void hunters. What do they want?" Terran's scales darkened. "They were like us once. crystalline beings who sought to enhance themselves by harnessing void energy. Instead, it corrupted them, left them hollow. Now they seek to corrupt others, to spread their emptiness across the galaxy. The transport shuddered as it approached the colony. Through the view screen, Naomi saw the devastation. Buildings of living crystal cracked and darkened, their natural luminescence dimmed by void corruption. Shadow-wrapped figures moved through the streets, pursuing fleeing colonists. Remember, Terran instructed as they prepared to disembark, void energy disrupts our crystalline technology. Standard weapons are barely effective. She hesitated, then handed Naomi a small crystal shard. This is tuned to my personal frequency. If we're separated, we won't be, Naomi assured her, tucking the crystal into her suit. The moment she touched it, she felt a subtle resonance, like a distant harmony. The battle that followed was chaos. Naomi coordinated with colonial security forces, directing evacuees while Terran and her warriors engaged the hunters. The void beings were terrifying up close. Humanoid shapes wrapped in writhing shadows, their movements wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Then something unexpected happened. During a particularly fierce skirmish, Naomi found herself back-to-back with Terran, surrounded by hunters. As they fought together, she felt the crystal shard pulse in sync with her heightened adrenaline. Terran gasped as her scales blazed with unprecedented brilliance. Your energy, the warrior breathed between shots. It's amplifying our crystalline resonance. Naomi felt it too, a feedback loop of power flowing between them. Human adaptability enhancing Craxian stability. Terran's weapons punched through the hunters' void shields like they were paper. The shadows around their forms began to dissipate, leaving them vulnerable to conventional attacks. When it was over, the colony was saved, though heavily damaged. The surviving hunters retreated through their rifts, but Naomi knew they'd be back. They'd witnessed something new today, something that threatened their very existence. In the medical bay of the Crystal Spires, Vrilthos could barely contain his excitement as he reviewed the combat data. The resonance between you, the way your distinct biologies enhanced each other, it's unprecedented. With further study, we might be able to replicate this effect on a larger scale. The High Council will want to know about this, Terran noted, her scales still occasionally flickering with residual energy. A human-Craxian partnership could change everything. Naomi caught her gaze. I think it already has. As if in agreement, the crystal shard pulsed warmly against her chest, its resonance a promise of things to come. The training arena of the Crystal Spires pulsed with energy as Naomi and Terran moved in perfect synchronization. 3 weeks of intensive practice had transformed their accidental resonance into something approaching art. The crystal shard at Naomi's throat hummed in harmony with Terran's scales, their combined energy making the practice drone's void shields collapse. Your adaptation rate is increasing, Terran observed as they finished the exercise. Her scales rippled with pride and something deeper, more personal. You're learning to channel the resonance instinctively now. I have a good teacher, Naomi replied, trying to ignore how her heart raced when Terran's scales shifted to that particular shade of violet. The past weeks had brought them closer than either had expected, their biological synchronization creating a bond that transcended mere partnership. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of first speaker Krulvan, his ceremonial crystal armor casting rainbow refractions across the arena. Impressive performance, he noted, though his tone suggested he found it anything but. The High Council requests your presence, both of you. The council chambers were a marvel of crystalline architecture, with towering spires that seemed to pierce the purple sky above. 7 elder Craxians sat in graduated tiers, their scales a unified shade of formal indigo. Naomi recognized several from previous diplomatic sessions, though none had been particularly supportive of her continued presence on Craxus. The situation has become untenable, Council Leader Miravos began without preamble. The Void Hunters have increased their attacks threefold since the colonial incident. They're specifically targeting facilities where humans and Craxians work together. Because they fear what we can do, Terran interjected, her scales flashing with conviction. The resonance effect is dangerous and unpredictable. Krelvan cut in. We've received reports of crystalline instability in areas where these experiments have been conducted. Some fear we risk becoming like the hunters themselves, corrupted by power we don't fully understand. Naomi stepped forward, diplomatic training kicking in. With respect, Council, what Terran and I have discovered isn't corruption. It's evolution. Human adaptability doesn't destabilize Craxian crystal matrices. It enhances them, makes them stronger, more resilient, and more unpredictable, another council member noted. Our society is built on stability, Captain Hayes. The very qualities that make humans fascinating also make you dangerous. The chamber's crystals resonated with sudden alarm before anyone could respond. Emergency displays materialized, showing multiple void rifts opening around the city's outer defensive ring. They're testing our defenses, Terran analyzed, her scales shifting to battle-ready crimson. These aren't raid patterns. They're looking for weaknesses, preparing for something bigger. Go, Miravos ordered. Defend the city. But this discussion isn't over. The next hours were a blur of combat and coordination. Naomi and Terran moved like one being, their resonance effect inspiring other human Craxian pairs to attempt similar synchronization. Where they succeeded, the Void Hunters fell back in disarray. Where they failed, the casualties were devastating. There's something different about them, Naomi noted during a brief respite. She and Terran had taken position in a defensive spire, watching new rifts form and collapse. They're more organized than before, almost like they're evolving too, Terran finished. Her scales shifted uneasily. They're learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics. The void corruption is becoming more sophisticated. A massive explosion rocked the city's western quarter. Through the crystalline walls, they watched in horror as an entire defense tower went dark, its luminescence extinguished by creeping shadows. They breached the inner perimeter. The tactical network erupted with panic. Unknown void weapon detected. It's corrupting the crystal matrices faster than our purification protocols can respond. Naomi felt Terran's fear through their resonance link, but also her determination. Without discussion, they moved to join the counterattack. As they ran, Naomi activated her emergency transmitter, broadcasting to the Earth Embassy on the planet's far side. This is Captain Hayes. We need immediate implementation of Protocol Omega. Authorization code, Hayes 7 Delta Nexus. Protocol Omega. Terran asked as they reached the impact zone. The corruption was worse up close, living crystal turning black and brittle, its natural resonance replaced by an empty void. Something I've been working on with Earth's Xenobiology division, Naomi explained, watching the shadows advance. If human adaptability can enhance Craxian crystals, maybe it can also help them resist corruption. We've synthesized a compound based on human genetic markers. A void beast burst from the shadows, larger than any they'd encountered before. Its form shifted between solid and gaseous, tentacles of pure darkness reaching for them. Terran's weapons seemed to pass right through it. Whatever you're planning. The warrior growled. Do it fast. The beast struck, its tentacles wrapping around Terran's arm. Her scales began to darken immediately, corruption spreading like ink in water. Naomi acted on instinct, pressing her hand against Terran's crystals. Their resonance surged, fighting the corruption, but it wasn't enough. Stay with me, Naomi whispered, pressing their foreheads together. Focus on my energy, my pattern. Remember what we learned in training. Adaptation requires stability. Stability enables adaptation. Through their connection, she felt Terran's pain, her fear of becoming like the hunters. But she also felt her trust, absolute and unwavering. Together, they pushed back against the void's empty hunger, their combined resonance creating something entirely new. The beast recoiled as if burned. Around them, the corrupted crystals began to pulse with renewed light. Not their original color, but something richer, more complex. The darkness retreated, leaving behind crystals that shimmered with an inner fire that reminded Naomi of Earth's auroras. How? Terran breathed, examining her transformed scales. They retained a shadow of darkness, but it no longer felt corrupt. Instead, it added depth, complexity, evolution. Naomi replied, supporting her partner as reinforcements arrived. We didn't just resist the corruption. We transformed it, made it part of us, on our terms. As medical teams secured the area, they watched Earth shuttles descend with supplies of the Protocol Omega compound. But Naomi knew the real breakthrough wasn't chemical. It was the bond between them, showing both their peoples a new way forward. The Council would have to listen now. The Void Hunters had changed the game, but so had they. The real question was, were both their societies ready for what came next? Master Healer Vrilthos's hands trembled as he studied the latest readings. The transformed crystals from the defense tower pulsed with unprecedented energy patterns, neither purely Craxian nor recognizably human, but something gloriously, terrifyingly new. The implications are staggering, he told Naomi and Terran, who stood close together, their resonance making nearby instruments hum. You haven't just created a defense against void corruption. You've discovered a way to transcend our biological limitations entirely. And the Void Hunters know it, Terran added, her scales shifting through complex patterns of concern. That's why their attacks have become so desperate. They recognize an existential threat when they see one. A thunderous explosion interrupted them, followed by multiple alarm signals. The medical bay's crystalline walls displayed tactical readouts showing dozens of void rifts opening simultaneously around the planet. This is it, Naomi breathed. Their main assault. The tactical network erupted with reports of massive void ships emerging from the rifts, vessels that seemed to be made of solid darkness, their hulls writhing with corrupted energy. Leading them was a ship larger than any previously encountered, its form suggesting a perverted mockery of Craxian crystal architecture. The Void Queen, Terran whispered, scales paling. She's finally shown herself. Through the city's long-range sensors, they watched the massive vessel approach. Its presence seemed to accelerate the natural magnetic storms of Craxus, creating a maelstrom of destructive energy that their shields barely held against. All warriors to battle stations. First Speaker Krelvan's voice echoed through the crystal network. Activate planetary defense grid. Emergency Protocol 7 is now in effect. That's evacuation of non-essential personnel, Terran translated, already moving toward the armory. They're preparing for the worst. Naomi grabbed her arm. Wait. Vrilthos, show them what you showed us. The readings from the transformed crystals. The healer quickly projected his findings. The display showed complex energy patterns spiraling between order and chaos, stability and change, each supporting the other in an endless dance. The void corruption isn't just destruction, Naomi explained. It's stagnation. The hunters tried to force evolution and instead became trapped between states, eternally hungry for what they lost. But together, human and Craxian, we can show them another way. A beautiful theory. Krelvan's voice cut in as he entered the medical bay. But the Queen's ship alone could crack this planet in half. We don't have time for experiments. Another explosion rocked the city. The tactical displays showed void beasts pouring through smaller rifts, overwhelming outer defenses with sheer numbers. Actually, Vrilthos interjected, time is exactly what we have. Captain Hayes, your Protocol Omega compound. It was designed to enhance crystal resonance, yes. To help Craxian matrices accept and adapt to change, rather than merely resist it. Yes, but Naomi's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. The planetary defense grid. It's one massive crystal matrix. And the magnetic storms, Terran added, her scales brightening with sudden understanding. They're not just interfering with our defenses, they're creating a planet-wide resonance field. We'd need an enormous amount of the compound, Krelvan argued. And even then, the energy required to catalyze such a large-scale transformation would have to come from a perfectly synchronized human-Craxian pair, Vril-Thus finished. One with an established resonance bond, willing to risk everything to serve as a focal point for the change. Naomi and Terran's eyes met. Through their bond, each felt the other's immediate acceptance of what needed to be done, along with the fear of what it might cost them. "The crystalline spire at the city's heart," Terran said. "It's the focal point of the planetary defense grid. If we can channel our resonance through it, the transformation would spread through the entire matrix," Naomi finished. "But the energy required, it would mean joining our patterns completely. We might not survive as separate individuals." "Better to transform together than fall separately," Terran replied, her scales shifting to a deep, determined blue. The crystal shard at Naomi's throat pulsed in agreement. Krulvan studied them for a long moment, then bowed deeply. "May the crystal heart guide your path. I'll order the compound distributed through the defense grid's injection systems. The Council will buy you as much time as we can." They ran through corridors increasingly damaged by void attacks, passing warriors and civilians preparing for what might be their last stand. The closer they got to the central spire, the stronger the resonance between them grew, until Naomi could hardly tell where her consciousness ended and Terran's began. The spire's heart chamber was a marvel of crystalline engineering, with energy conduits stretching out to every corner of the planet. As they took position at its center, they watched through the tactical network as the Void Queen's ship entered the atmosphere, its corruption spreading like a stain across the sky. "Are you sure about this?" Naomi asked, taking Terran's hands. "Once we start, there's no going back. We'll either transform everything, including ourselves, or—" "I've never been more sure of anything," Terran replied. Her scales shifted through every color they'd ever shown, finally settling on a deep, loving violet. "You changed everything the moment you crashed on this planet. Now let's change everything else." Their resonance built as Protocol Omega flooded the defense grid. Around them, the crystals began to pulse with new patterns of light and shadow, order and chaos dancing together in perfect harmony. Through their expanding awareness, they felt the void corruption approaching, not just the ships and beasts, but the hollow hunger that drove them. "Ready?" Naomi whispered. "Ready," Terran answered. Together, they opened themselves completely to their bond, letting their patterns merge and transform. The last thing either of them experienced as separate beings was a sense of profound rightness, of two halves finally becoming whole. The light from the central spire reached toward the stars, and the real change began. The transformation began as a single point of light at the heart of the crystal spires, where two beings who had once been Naomi Hayes and Terrandril surrendered their separate identities to become something new. The light spread through the planetary defense grid, riding the resonance channels of Protocol Omega, until all of Craxus shimmered with unprecedented energy. In orbit, the Void Queen watched through sensors that could no longer distinguish between matter and energy, order and chaos. The emptiness within her, the eternal hunger that had driven her people for millennia, responded to something it recognized in the light: the promise of change, of evolution, of an end to stagnation. The light reached her ship in waves of transformative energy. Where it touched the corrupted crystal of her vessel, new patterns emerged, not the sterile perfection of pure crystal, nor the writhing chaos of the void, but a harmonious dance between the two. Her crew, so long trapped in their half-life of eternal hunger, felt something they had forgotten was possible: hope. Inside the central spire, the being that had been born from Naomi and Terran's union existed in a state beyond individual consciousness. Through their merged awareness, they experienced the transformation of an entire world. They felt every crystal matrix on Craxus shift and change, incorporating aspects of void energy while maintaining its essential nature. They sensed the Void Hunters' resistance crumble as their corrupted forms encountered a power that offered evolution instead of stagnation. Master Healer Vril-Thus, watching from the safety of a reinforced chamber, recorded everything. He observed how the transformed crystals created new resonance patterns that bridged the gap between stability and change. The void beasts, rather than being destroyed, were transformed into creatures of living light and shadow, their chaotic nature tamed but not eliminated. Remarkable, he breathed, watching the Void Queen's massive ship undergo its metamorphosis. They found the middle path, not resistance, not surrender, but true synthesis. The transformation spread beyond Craxus, following the paths of void rifts back to their sources. On distant worlds corrupted by the hunters, new forms of crystal began to grow, structures that pulsed with both light and shadow, strength and flexibility, tradition and change. Hours passed as the wave of transformation swept the sector. When it finally stabilized, the being in the central spire began to change again. The merged consciousness that had guided the transformation slowly, carefully divided, not back into its original components, but into two new forms that maintained their connection while regaining their individuality. First speaker Krelvan found them in the heart chamber, their forms crystalline yet fluid, neither fully human nor purely Craxian. They glowed with internal light that shifted between all known colors and some that had no names. The Void Queen requests an audience, he informed them, his scales rippling with awe. Her fleet, what remains of it. They wish to understand what they've become. The being that had once been Naomi smiled, its form momentarily becoming more human-like. They'd become what they always sought to be. Evolved, but not corrupted. Changed, but not lost. The hunger is gone, the transformed Terran added, her crystalline scales flowing like liquid starlight. They can finally stop running from what they are and learn to become what they could be. Together, they emerged from the central spire to find a changed world. The crystal spires still reached toward the sky, but now they incorporated streams of shadow that added depth and complexity to their structure. The very air seemed alive with possibility, as stability and change danced in endless harmony. The Void Queen had landed her transformed vessel outside the city. She emerged to meet them, her form a striking combination of crystal clarity and void shadow. Around them, humans and Craxians worked alongside transformed hunters, all of them changed by what they had witnessed. "You've shown us a new way," the Queen acknowledged, her voice carrying echoes of the void but no longer empty. "Our people spent millennia trying to force evolution through corruption. We never understood that true transformation requires both stability and change, working in harmony." In the days that followed, delegations from Earth and other worlds arrived to witness what had happened on Craxus. They found not the aftermath of a battle, but the beginning of a new civilization, one that had transcended the limitations of both crystal and void. The being that had been Naomi retained her diplomatic skills, helping to forge agreements between transformed peoples. Her counterpart, once Terran, led the effort to understand and control their new abilities. Together, they established the first Academy of Harmonic Evolution, where humans, Craxians, and former hunters could learn to balance change and stability in their own unique ways. "Did you know it would be like this?" Vrilthos asked them one evening, as they watched the triple moons of Craxus rise over a city that glowed with both light and shadow. "When you chose to merge, did you know you'd be able to become individuals again?" They exchanged a glance that seemed to contain entire conversations. "We knew we'd become something new," the transformed Naomi answered. "But isn't that what evolution is all about? Becoming what you never imagined you could be, while keeping the essence of what you are," her partner added, their forms shifting closer together until light and shadow danced between them. Above them, the void rifts that had once brought terror now served as stable passages between worlds, their darkness tempered by crystalline light. Ships of new design passed through them, vessels that combined the best aspects of all three civilizations. The war was over, but the real transformation was just beginning. As the former Void Queen had said, they had found a new way forward, not through conquest or resistance, but through the courage to change while remaining true to oneself. Through the wisdom to know that sometimes, The greatest strength comes not from fighting what you fear, but from embracing it, transforming it, and making it part of who you are becoming. On Craxus, the crystals sang with new harmonies, songs of shadow and light, of stability and change, of endings and beginnings. And in those songs, those who listened closely could hear the echo of two beings who had dared to become something more, showing the way for others to follow.